Hello there, what do we have? We have a pollen grain here and a tube growing out of that pollen grain. A pollen grain and a pollen tube. You say, where'd the flower go? Well, this is a very disappointed pollen tube. It was artificially stimulated to grow without a flower, and so it's the pollen tube to nowhere. Anyway, so it's pollen grain, pollen tube. How many objects are inside the pollen tube? One, two, three. Where'd they come from? Well, probably out of the pollen grain, but let's check it out. Let's see. Wow, what do we see here? We see a little pollen grain just starting to grow its tube, and I see two objects inside the pollen grain and one just starting to leave the pollen grain and going into the pollen tube. Here I think we see about the same thing down here, although it's not real clear. What do we have here with this pollen grain and its pollen tube? We have two objects still in the pollen grain proper, and one has left the pollen grain and entered the pollen tube down here. Again, our 1, 2, 3 objects, first in the pollen grain, then in the pollen tube. Here's one still in the pollen grain, and here's one, and it's a little blurry, but there's the other one in the pollen tube. And so, what's going on here? Pollen grain grows a pollen tube. Three objects that were originally inside the pollen grain enter the pollen tube and normally head on down toward what? Down toward the ovary and mesovule. Lots of mesovules down there, usually. And so, what are those objects? Well, we'll discuss that in the next video, but I bet two of them are sperm cells, right? You better believe it. Now let's see this in the context of a flower. What in the world are we looking at? Well, let's look at our model here. We are on the rooftop. Up here, what is this called up here? The stigma. The stigma. And this series of slides will take us down a little bit into this part here. What's this called right here? The what? The style. Stigma, style. And actually we're going to kind of come around the right side of the stigma down to the style where it narrows back down. Stigma, style. Let's see how this works. All right, what do we got here? We got stigma. This is stigma. It's hollow inside. That's why you see these open spaces. It's actually hollow inside the stigma. What are all these things stuck up here in the stigma hairs? They are pollen grains. Let's take a closer look. Yes, pollen grains. They look like they've been sliced and diced. Why is that? Because they've been sliced and diced by the knife that has made very thin sections through this sample. And so, wow, lily pollen. You can see they're sliced and diced, but you can kind of get an idea of what the hard outer coat of lily pollen looks like. Very different than the pollen grains we looked at earlier of what were they, rose pollen and grass pollen and ragweed pollen. Yeah, look very different than those. And what do we have here? We're now coming around the right side. We're coming around the bend, so to speak, around the top and down the right side of the stigma. It's hollow inside the stigma. What are all these things? Down in here in the hollow section, the hollow part of the stigma. They are pollen tubes growing from these pollen grains. Each pollen grain sends a pollen tube on south. And so here we have the outside of the stigma. It's hollow inside the stigma. And these are all pollen tubes heading on downward. And so we're starting to come back in, starting to narrow down as we approach the what part of the pistil or the carpel? The style. Yeah, let's go down a little farther. Oh, now we're narrowing down. Here's one. We've narrowed down. We're in the style now down here. And so here's one side of the style. Here's the other side. And it's hollow in the center of the style. And what are all these things heading on south here in the style? Pollen grains. Not pollen grains, but pollen tubes. The pollen grains are still up on the roof. But the pollen tubes are heading on south here. And hundreds of them, all heading down to all those ovules in the basement. And so here's our final picture. We're now definitely down the style. Here's one side, here's the other side of the style. What is this flow coming down the style? Lots and lots, hundreds and hundreds of pollen tubes. But we got to kind of hold them up. Okay, slow down, guys. We haven't gotten this ovule ready for your arrival yet. And so we're going to put this part on hold, and we're going to get Ms. Ovule ready here in just a little bit for the arrival of Mr. Pollen Tube. All right, that's it for this one.